Football Convos number 11, Alex Kirby.
If you have a really good idea of where you want to be, if you can visualize that, it'll help you make decisions that will get you to that point.
For conversations with the players, coaches, and contributors that make this game great.
Regulators, mount up. We're coming.
Football Convos. Here's your host, Andy Carlson.
Very pleased to be joined now on Football Convos by Alex Kirby. He's on the Twitter machine at AlexJKirby. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Alex is a former high school and college assistant coach, including 3 seasons on staff at the Indiana State University. There we go. He's since moved on from coaching and gotten into writing. His first book, called Speed Kills, Breaking Down the Chip Kelly Offense, is available now. And his second book, Inside the Auburn Offense, is due out on February 17th. And Alex, I wanted to have you on to get your story, especially football-wise. So where did it all begin with you?
Well, I probably have a very different story than a lot of people because I actually never played football. It would probably be a 3-hour podcast if I told you the whole story. But basically, my parents just didn't think they thought it was a waste of time, basically. Oh. And so from about 7th grade on, I was constantly bugging my parents to let me play football. And eventually, when I got to high school, I got involved with the radio program, and they covered the football games on Friday nights. So I was able to do that and had a lot of fun, enjoyed doing it, enjoyed being the color commentary guy up in the booth. And then the next year, I was able to, because of my contact with the football staff, because of the broadcasting job, I came on as the video guy for the high school team there at Ben Davis. Mm-hmm. And it was my first chance to be around the team, got to know the coaches real well, really enjoyed it. And from there on out, I stuck around after graduation and just kind of in the years after that worked my way up to a varsity assistant and had a lot of fun and learned a lot of football.
What was your specialty when you were helping out high school coaching?
Well, as anybody who is trying to break into the business will tell you, you got to do a little bit of everything. But I would probably say that my specialty was the offensive side of the ball. I worked with the offensive guys. At one point, I was in charge of the scout defense. So you'd have to study up on the opponent defense and get a group of guys ready to give them that look. During the weekend practice. And then on game days, I would have a couple different assignments, just depending on what they needed me to do. But it was a great learning experience for me.
Gotcha. Now, backtracking to your radio commentary, which is something near and dear to my heart. Now, what would you compare your color commentary to? Were you a Gruden, Madden, more of a Collinsworth? What were you?
Well, I love Gruden, what he's doing now. So I would love to, consider myself more towards him. But anybody who listened, and I'm sure my radio teacher would tell you, I didn't really hold back a whole lot because, it was something brand new to me, as it would be for anybody in that position. And I just wanted to have fun. I loved studying football. I was fortunate enough the coaching staff actually let me get my hands on opponent film each week, so I would actually sit and break down what the other team was going to do. So I had I had kind of like a call sheet in front of me as well. But it was I had a lot of fun. My partner in the booth, Keith Serwinski, I think we worked really well together. He's actually a teacher now in the same township where we grew up. But yeah, we worked really well together, and we had a lot of fun. And once again, it was a great learning experience for me.
Ah, very cool. So how did you make the jump from high school assistant up to Indiana State, which is the Sycamores, correct?
Correct, yeah. Well, basically, I wanted to go to school somewhere because immediately after high school, I did not go directly to college. I in addition to coaching football, I worked several different jobs. But I knew I wanted to be involved. I didn't want to just go away to Terre Haute, which is where Indiana State is located, and not have anything to do with football for, several years. So I ended up walking into the football office there and asking, if they needed any help. And they didn't know who I was. They didn't know anything about me. They just thought I was some kid who wanted to hang out. But eventually I got on as kind of like an assistant video guy. But then once we started camp, I realized that a lot of the stuff that in their playbook was basically old school West Coast offense terminology, stuff that I had, gotten familiar with over the past few years because, like I said, I mean, that's pretty much a lot of what I did was, study football. I got several old 49er playbooks at home that I used to go through. So all that stuff kind of came rushing back. And then they realized that, hey, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. So, the more I was available, the more responsibility came along, and I was with them for the past 3 years after that.
Now, as far as offensive philosophy, you said that you went through old 49er manuscripts. Would you say Bill Walsh was your biggest influence?
At that time, yeah. I mean, I found at that time when I was first starting out, I kind of would go to the library and find any football book I could get my hands on. And one of the first really good ones I read was, the Finding the Winning Edge, that one that is now selling online for what, like $200 or something. Mm-hmm. But I found some great stuff in that book, and as people who have read the book know, there's a lot of actual X's and O's stuff in the back. He has an appendix with terminology and things like that. But I also found a lot of good stuff online. Actually, one of the places where I learned the most was actually, I think the website is still up, westcoastoffense.com, which was, I found that, and I probably printed out every single piece of information they had off that website on the school's computer as I was growing up. But that actually taught me a lot. At the time, yeah, Bill Walsh was definitely on my number one of list of influences.
So why'd you get out of coaching and into writing?
Why did I?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just, after a while, you just decide that maybe at the time it's just not what you're wanting to do. I honestly, I felt a little wore down, burnt out a little bit, quite frankly, because, like I said, anybody who's breaking into that business knows that you're going to have to work really, really long hours for not that much money.
Sure.
And I kind of, I wanted to do other things besides football as well. I've always been somebody who's been interested in working for myself, which is kind of why it's another reason I drifted toward writing. But, it was a number of reasons. I wouldn't say there was just one. I still love the game, obviously, because that's what, my work now is focused on. But it just felt like the right thing to do at the time.
All right, so why Chip Kelly and his offense for the first book?
Well, it's something that I watched from afar for a long time. Everybody knows the name. Quite frankly, I chose him for the first book because I knew it was something that everybody was interested in. If I'm a big fan of, Paul Johnson's attack at Georgia Tech as well, but I didn't think that would be performed quite as well.
You mean the triple option isn't as sexy as the Oregon offense?
You apparently not, but yeah, I mean, like I said, I actually, there's not a lot of things offensively that I don't, enjoy watching to some degree or another. The Chip Kelly book, honestly, was just a purely business decision. I love watching his stuff, but at the end of the day, he's the sexy name right now in coaching. So that had a lot to do with it.
What's the biggest misconception that you found while writing the book that people have of what Chip Kelly does at New Hampshire, then Oregon, then eventually with the Eagles?
Well, for much of my research of the book, I didn't really get too much into what he did at Oregon or New Hampshire. Most of it was with the Eagles right now in the NFL. But I would say that the number one misconception is that he's running some secret plays that are eventually going to get found out and adapted to, and then he's not going to be able to run his offense anymore. Basically, he does do some interesting things, formation-wise especially, and he has the ability to tailor his offense to just about any good quarterback that he has on his roster. But Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, those guys have been running up-tempo spread offenses for years in the NFL. And while Chip definitely puts his own spin on it, I think that there's been too much made of the college-type offense that he ran, because that's not what the stuff he ran at Oregon is not what he's running in Philadelphia. I mean, there is some carryover for sure, but there's some marked differences from one to the other.
Now, do you believe the older type people who say that this isn't a quote unquote pro style offense and it'll never last in the NFL, or do you think that he can have success with it?
Oh, I think he can definitely have some success with it. I mean, you look at what kind of success Philadelphia has had the last couple of years since he's been there. They started out very well this season. Unfortunately, had a couple key injuries down the stretch. Losing their quarterback Nick Foles really hurt them, obviously. But they are not. It's not a situation where, like I said, that he was running some secret plays that everybody figured out. It was just a matter of performance, quite frankly, this past year, in my opinion, that they didn't get to where they needed to go. But, I mean, as far as, plays and concepts, he's doing a lot of the same things that other teams are doing. He's just doing it at a little bit faster tempo.
Now, what makes Chip and his offense so quarterback-friendly, as it were? You hear a lot of analysts say that his offense is basically quarterback-proof. Now, I don't really believe that to a degree, but he has had some success with quarterbacks of varying talents. Michael Vick, Nick Foles, and then also Sanchez there for a little bit.
Well, the first thing I would say to that is that even Chip will tell you, I remember watching one of his press conferences and saying, I hear people saying that you can plug any quarterback into this offense. He goes, well, that's just not true. He said anybody who thinks any quarterback can play in this offense doesn't know how to evaluate quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. He brought Mark Sanchez onto that team because he thought Sanchez could play, and turns out he could. I think our expectations were extremely low for Sanchez after that stint in New York. I think the first time he completed a pass, people were just amazed, But that's the kind of coaching that Chip will get. And obviously Sanchez is not that franchise's long-term quarterback answer. But the point is that, Chip's offense, it just makes sense. And he tries to, instead of making himself look smart with long play calls and things like that, he just wants to make it as simple as possible for his guys. And I think that's what good coaches everywhere do. I mean, that's not just Chip. He didn't invent that. But he does some things unique to himself and what he's done in the past, as well as, there's been a lot of articles written about this type of sports science that goes into the training there in Philadelphia, and he guards that probably as tightly as the CIA guards their facilities.
All of the smoothies.
As far as, yeah, exactly. Yeah, each player has their own individual smoothie. They track sleep patterns and everything else like that, which, I'm sure that'll be commonplace in the NFL here in the next 10, 15 years because it works, So it's a lot of things. I can't point to one specific thing, but, he makes things simpler for the players as much as possible, and, he really makes sure they're taking care of their body.
Now, going back to the play calling and making it simpler, what would be an example of a Chip offensive play call? Because I know some of those West Coast offensive play calls can become almost like a paragraph. I can't even imagine what it'd be like in a quarterback trying to relay all that info.
Well, as far as actual terminology, I do have some shots of his call sheets that people have sent me, from television. I couldn't sit here and tell you exactly what terminology he uses. I know it's probably a little bit less than average that the average NFL team would use. He doesn't necessarily use a lot of one-word calls, that some people have said, but I think the biggest thing is just he also at the beginning of the year, you're starting off with a smaller amount of plays to get good at. It's the same type of philosophy. We'd rather do a few things well than a lot of things okay. Mm-hmm. And so once you get that foundation established, then that's when you can go in and start to mess around with a few wrinkles here and there.
Now, moving on to your second book, and speaking of offense that some people see is simplistic but has had a ton of success, Inside of Auburn. Tell me all about Gus.
Well, that's another interesting offense a lot of people are talking about. Like you said, it's really fascinating to me because Gus Malzahn has really been tweaking this offense since day one. He wrote an actual book back in the day when he was still a high school coach in Arkansas about the principles of the offense. And, he basically said we want to give our offense as many chances as possible. We want to basically extend the playing time of the game, whereas over, a 40-second period, an offense can let the play clock run down if they want, or they could, run maybe 2 to 3 plays in that same time span. So they want to give their offense as many opportunities as possible to make a big game-breaking play.
Now, what would you say is the difference between Gus's up-tempo style of option football and Chip Kelly?
I would say, well, first of all, in the NFL, I think Chip has maybe uses a few fewer formations. Gus, if you watch, a season of his offensive football, he will get in some really crazy, funky formations that really put stress on the defense. The other thing is he's got a lot more run schemes right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, there were some rumors about him maybe going to San Francisco with the 49ers. I don't know, and obviously that's not going to happen now. But if he were to make that jump to the professional level, I don't know how much that would change and how much of that would stay the same. But it's really kind of difficult comparing the two because they are at two different levels. But I would say right now, just in terms of X's and O's, Chip is a little simpler as far as his run schemes because he really doesn't have that many, whereas Gus has a few more, and he has a few more formations, I think.
I was talking to Travis Hancock. He's a producer at, I forget the call, but it's a Charlotte radio station for my other podcast, Purple for the Win, about when the Vikings were ready to play the Panthers. And that was about the time where the Panthers were in the tank. They had no dreams of making the playoffs, even though they're still technically mathematically alive and did make it. And his dream, and a lot of Panthers fans' dream, was to ride Riverboat Ron off in the sunset and throw like $1 bajillion at Gus Malzahn, pair him up with Cam, War Damn Eagle yet again. Do you think eventually he'll make the jump to the NFL?
It's hard to say with a guy like Gus because I would say never. I would not say never because, money talks and things change, and people fall out of favor with fan bases. 3 years from now, you never know. Things could happen, and Gus might not be the best, everyone's favorite person in Auburn anymore. So that might happen. But I think the thing about Gus is he knows what he's looking for in staff and in a situation. And so he's not just going to bolt to the NFL for, somebody offers him a huge amount of money. That's really not that important to him, I don't think. But I think the thing is he knows exactly what he wants in a situation, and if he feels comfortable with a certain organization, certain owner, certain GM, that's another thing, by the way. A lot of college coaches don't factor that into their decision, but there's no position like GM in college, where you basically have a second person to answer to other than the owner. The AD is kind of like the owner from college to pro, but there is nobody like the GM at the college level. So it's an interesting thing, and that's what Chip Kelly has been kind of struggling with this offseason. It looks like things are going his way right now, but that's probably part of the issue when it comes to guys like Gus Malzahn or any successful head coach moving on to the professional level is, are you going to be able to run things the way you want to run them? Everybody, knocks Nick Saban for what he did in Miami, but, I'm not sure that he always got everything he wanted to get in order to be successful, in order to turn that franchise around. So there's a million different variables that go into it, but I don't think unless Gus got the absolute perfect scenario, I don't think he goes to the professional level.
So you're saying that Gus ain't going to the Jets anytime soon?
I doubt it.
And go back to Saban, like you said, there is some sort of motivation behind these guys, some sort of a little bit of ego to want to succeed on the highest level. And I think Saban, once he got to Miami, I know that Rick Spielman was down there in the front office. He's near and dear to my heart as a Vikings fan. And he didn't have that complete autonomy or control that he's used to as a huge micromanager as in college. But if he would have picked Drew Brees coming off his shoulder surgery over Dante Culpepper, he might still be in Miami.
Well, that's true. And actually, I remember hearing Nick talk about that at a clinic. from the way he tells it, and I haven't really looked into this situation that much, so I don't know all the details. But from the way he tells it, Breeze actually he wanted Drew Brees to come, and Breeze actually failed the physical by the Miami doctor. The Miami doctor failed him on the physical. So, and then he goes to, I mean, you know the rest of the story. So apparently he feels like he got shafted a little bit in that deal. Because, I mean, you and I both know Nick Saban gets a quarterback when, you know, it's a whole different story.
What could have been? Oh, well. Tell me about Draw Football Plays.
DrawFootballPlays.com is a little site I put together because, for one thing, there weren't a whole lot of options for, first of all, guys like me to create diagrams for football sites, you know, whether you're a blogger, a writer, whatever. Weren't a whole lot of places to find stuff like that. You'd either have to go to Microsoft Paint or, you know, people do it in Visio, but that's a very expensive program. Or if you're a coach, you know, you're a youth coach or maybe you're a 8-man football coach or a 12-man football coach, whatever, you can't find really a program that works for you or, you know, there's some other programs out there that work well, but they're very expensive. So I just wanted to create something that, you know, would not cost a whole lot of money. It's a little bit scaled back, but it could get you where you want it to go if all you're trying to do is create some football diagrams. And so that was basically, I had the need for it initially, and then I kind of saw that other people didn't really have a whole lot of options either. So that's where I got the idea.
Oh, very cool. And it's $19.99 a year?
$19.99 a year or $2.99 a month, depending on what your preference is. Yes.
Oh, that's a very good deal, and better than paying, was it $250 for Playmaker Pro a year?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, like I said, I mean, I'm not knocking those programs at all. They work very well, but I just know that a lot of people don't want to spend that kind of money.
Definitely. Now, what's going on at your personal website, lifeafterfootballblog.com?
Well, right now I'm in the middle of uploading a bunch of film to the membership section, which is free, by the way. I don't charge for any memberships on that site. But we have, for one thing, we've got, you know, all kinds of playbooks and videos in the membership section. And then I'll post, you know, different things. I just got back from the 2015 AFCA convention in Louisville, so all my notes from there are up on the membership section. We've got, you know, some Gus Malzahn materials up there as well. A lot of professional and college playbooks. So it's, I think it's a good resource for people who are looking to learn more about football.
And just taking a look at your notes now, Bill Curry. I love that guy.
Oh, he's fantastic. I mean, I was ecstatic when I found out he was going to be there. And a friend of mine actually worked for him at Kentucky. So I've heard several stories. But I did get to meet with him face to face and talk for, you know, just a moment. But yeah, I totally agree. He's one of the guys I respect the most in this business.
Yeah, such an amazing man. Has a great story. Never has a bad word about anyone except for maybe Alabama's former athletic directors and stuff. But just very, very cool stuff. What was the highlight of the convention besides meeting Bill Curry for you?
Well, I think that was one of them. Definitely Bill Curry, the guy I've watched on TV. You know, he worked for ESPN for years, and they went back to the coaching at Georgia State. And obviously his history in pro football with the Packers and the Colts and Lombardi and all that stuff. Very, you know, guy, like I said, I have a lot of respect for him. But also Paul Johnson was at the convention this past year. Another guy who I'm a huge, huge fan of. I really believe that he's probably the best play caller in America. And I know people are going to roll their eyes when they hear that. But the guy doesn't have a call sheet, calls everything off the top of his head. He's been running the same thing for decades. And he just, if you really sit back and watch and break down, you know, several games, you'll see all the tiny little wrinkles that he'll put into a game plan. And it's just amazing. And, you know, the thing about watching Georgia Tech football is you got to turn out the announcers because every play is not a dive. You know, every play is not a jet sweep. Those are the two generic terms that they like to throw around. But there's just so much, there's so many little wrinkles that he throws into his game plan. It's just amazing to me how much he's able to get in to run and run well.
Is that going to be the third book?
I don't want to say anything official, but we're definitely working on something to do with the Georgia Tech offense for sure. There is something planned, but as yet there is no title or release date.
Ooh, baby. You ever miss coaching? Do you ever see yourself returning someday?
I do miss it at some times. I did go back. I'm living in Indianapolis now, and I did get to follow around my alma mater, Ben Davis, when they won the state championship this year. Mm-hmm. That was fun. I was at almost every single game, and yeah, sometimes you do miss it. But then there's other times like, excuse me, Tuesday afternoon when you're not doing anything and you don't have to be out of practice, that you don't miss it. So there's two sides of that coin, I think. But as far as getting back into it, I would never say never. I've definitely thought about it, but I think it's just got to be the right situation. And I've had people reach out to me a couple times and ask if I was interested. But at this point, for the near future, I am semi-retired.
All right, Alex, I'm going to bring you out of retirement for one play. We're going to talk about the play that everyone's talking about. Since you're an offensive guy, I'm going to toss you under the headset for Seattle. Deciding to run that pick play, throwing it on 2nd and 1, 26 seconds left with the timeout. What would you have done in that spot?
Well, first let me say, I totally, I don't want to say understand because I've never been in that situation, but I empathize with Pete Carroll because sometimes as coaches, by the way, that play was open. I mean, that was a tremendous play by the DB to get, I think his name's Butler, got underneath that ball and picked it off. So, it's not like they just threw into triple coverage and it was the worst throw in history. That being said, wasn't my favorite call. I think, people forget that they started off with, at the top of the play clock, there's 45, 50 seconds left, and they let that run all the way down. To me, if you're a professional team and you're relying on that timeout instead of being able to signal in no huddle plays, I think that's a problem. I understand the philosophy of not giving them a lot of time left, but, you're under a minute, under 45 seconds. You got to throw that out the window and just go for the win. Now, let me say, if you are going to throw a pass, I would much prefer rolling Russell Wilson out to one side or the other, where he's most dangerous. Either he throws it out of the back of the end zone, or he runs for a touchdown, or he throws for a touchdown. So I think there are better ways to do it. But that being said, I understand his justification for, throwing the ball there. I get it. I don't agree with it, but I can see his side of it, if you understand what I'm saying. But to me, the thing that bothers me more than anything else is the fact of what Darrell Bevel said after the game, where he was kind of saying that, the receiver should have made a bet. To me, that's not the time for that. That, you want to bring that up in a film meeting later on with just you and your receiver, that's fine. But I had a huge problem with that. I was ready to, and I criticized the play call like most people, but to me, that's an even bigger issue. Like, don't criticize your guys like that out in public, because they're not gonna trust you. And why would they when you kind of threw them under the bus like that? So, to me, that's the bigger issue. Whether the play call worked or not is, we can sit here and debate that forever. But one thing I think we can all agree on is that's not the way to handle that situation.
Definitely. And as a Vikings fan, I'm very familiar with Darrell Bevel and actually sort of campaigned for him to be the next head coach when we eventually hired Zimmer. Glad we got Zimmer. And I've always liked Darrell Bevel, but that you can't sell your guy out like that.
Yeah, and he might have had a point too, by the way. I'm not saying he's wrong, but I just don't think that was the right time for that sort of thing. And to be perfectly honest, I don't think Pete Carroll or Darrell Bevel owe anybody except outside of their team, outside of the locker room, an explanation. If he would have just given the Belichick treatment and said, we just thought it put us in the best position to win, and left it at that, I would have been okay with that. I've been on the other side of that in locker rooms where, people on the outside might not understand why you make a certain decision, but that you felt like you gave you the best chance to win. And if he had said that, I'm fine with that. But I think Bevel went a little bit too far in that situation.
Yeah, definitely agree there. All right, Alex, we got to get you off the field, so let's go 3 and out, which is a list of 3 quick-fire questions to bring us on home. Are you ready, sir?
Let's do it.
Who has been the most influential in your career, both coaching and writing-wise?
Well, coaching, I'm going to have to go with 2 people. First one is Tom Allen, who was the head coach at Ben Davis at the time when I was in high school. He's actually now the defensive coordinator at South Florida. He just got that job a few weeks back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, but he was the first, he gave me my job as, kind of the video guy, which got me my start. And then he left for a college coaching job after that year. And Mike Kirshner, the guy who's still there now, who just won his first state championship as a head coach, actually let me stay on and kind of put up with a lot of stupid stuff that I did as a young guy, as far as, nothing bad, but just,
Yep.
You do things as a young coach where, you look back and you go, what was I thinking,
Mm-hmm.
So he put up with a lot, but he was very understanding, and I'm very grateful to him for giving me my start in football. As far as writing,
mm-hmm.
that's a tough question. I would say there's a lot of guys. It's probably not a traditional answer here, but there's a lot of guys online who I think are just tremendous writers. And I'm not just talking about your run-of-the-mill blogger here, but I think probably one of my favorite guys to read online is Spencer Hall of Every Day Should Be Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
I think when he's a pretty funny guy. He's one of my favorite follows on Twitter. But if he actually gets the chance to write a really serious long-form article, he just never fails to knock it out of the park. So I would say him for sure.
Definitely entertaining, but definitely comes from a knowledge base for sure.
Absolutely.
What's a piece of advice that you want to give someone who would like to follow in your footsteps as a writer and a student of the game?
Well, I would say for both things, you just kind of have to know where you want to end up, and have a very clear idea of that in your mind. Because if you have a clear vision, and I think that word gets overused sometimes, but if you have a really good idea of where you want to be, if you can visualize that, it'll help you make decisions that will get you to that point. And I never for one second, growing up, thought I would be, on the college football staff. It just turned out that way because I took advantage of the opportunities that had in front of me, and I made the right decisions. As for the writing thing, I think the same thing holds true. I mean, you have an idea of what you're trying to accomplish, and you just try to do the best you can. But at the same time, some of my best work has come from, when I originally set out to do something completely different. And I was just in the process, and it turned out that, something else would work better. So just keep your eyes out for opportunities, but at the same time, have an idea of where you want to go.
What's a book recommendation? We love reading here at Football Convos. Football, life, or otherwise, besides the obvious work by Alex Kirby.
I thought about this question for a while. For one thing, I would say, as I said earlier, I love Gruden, and his book that he wrote a while back after winning the Super Bowl. It's called Do You Love Football? It's absolutely one of my favorite football books ever. Not a lot of X's and O's necessarily, but just if you love what Gruden does on a Monday Night Football, you'll love this book. Let me just put it that way. I reread it once or twice a year because it's just so readable and enjoyable. I'm also a big fan of Belichick. I know that's not a popular opinion right now, but I think there's a book that was written by David Halberstam, who usually writes, historical books. But he wrote a book called The Education of a Coach, and it was all about Belichick and where he came from and his influences and things like that. So that's another one where, not a lot of X's and O's type stuff, but it's a very, very interesting story. So those two, I would say for sure.
That's awesome because those are actually two of my favorite football books I've also read. And The Education of the Coach is Belichick and his coming up where his dad was a scout for Navy for so long. Those stories were just so interesting. And then also the Gruden book. It's hard not to read the book since it's written in first person, not in the read it not in the Gruden voice. I'll tell you what, man. We're in Oakland, getting there at office at 4 a.m.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how it sounds in my head. Yep.
All right. So, Alex, what's up next for you? What should the good people be looking forward to?
Well, like I said, Inside the Auburn Offense comes out on the 17th. I'm really looking forward to get that out there. And then I got several different projects, and I haven't talked about this. Excuse me, I haven't talked about this on any type of public forum yet. But we are a friend of mine and myself are planning to put out 2 different books here in the next month or so about actually breaking down every single play of the national championship game and the Super Bowl. So just that's one book for each. But it's something that I don't think has ever been done. At least I haven't seen it been done anywhere. And I think it's other than the actual plays themselves, because there's a lot of great writers out there who will break down the X's and O's of a particular play. But I think what's also interesting is the mindset going from play to play, setting up certain things in offense and defense, what the coach is thinking. So I think that would be an interesting topic to explore. So right now there's no official release date, but we're aiming for the end of March for both of those.
That's very cool. I can do the cliff notes for both of them. Our national championship, Zeke, and the Super Bowl, Edelman.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of that stuff for sure.
And all of Alex's info will be available on our Football Convo show page. He's Alex Kirby, lifeafterfootballblog.com, at Alex J. Kirby on the Twitter machine. A new book, as he said, Inside Auburn Offense, drops on February 17th. Alex, thank you so much for your time. It's really good talking to you, and thanks for coming on Football Convos.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Football Convos. For more daily football conversations, visit footballconvos.com or visit us at iTunes.